Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Bryden. I am the chair of the Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee for the Portland, Maine Board of Education. It is 8:17 p.m. on March 28th, 2023, and I am calling to order this meeting of the committee. We are, let's see, in terms of attendance, myself, we have board member Opperman, we have board member Figdor, and we have board member Youssef. We are all committee members. And then with us, we also have board members Lentz, Russell Better, who are not members of the committee, but who are members of the board. Thank you so much for joining us. And we have several members of staff. Thank you also for joining. In terms of the goal for this meeting, what we need to do this evening is to pass a budget to move along to the full board. And we do have some late breaking news that I'm going to let the superintendents speak to in a moment that's going to cause a slight adjustment to our agenda. Ordinarily, what we would do is we would discuss the current iteration of budget. Members of the committee ordinarily would make motions if they feel so moved to amend the budget. We would go through each of those motions one by one. But because we have updated information, I'm going to now turn this over to co-interim superintendents, Erin Townsend and Malia Nally, to speak to what we've learned and the new path that we're going to take for this meeting. Go ahead.
Great. I can kick us off here. Sorry, I'm just kind of having webinar problems. Good evening, everybody. So I think most of the board members were at the last meeting, but for the sake of the public, we found out moments before joining the city council meeting that there's a change to the formula in terms of our state funding that's a result of the mill rate dropping. And this was some sort of algorithm error apparently at the state level. And the good news is that it results in $3.6 million more than we were previously expecting in terms of the state revenue. So rather than a reduction in funding, we're going slightly up 1.2. Is that right, Miranda and Aaron? Mm-hmm. And then as far as it affects the proposed budget that we brought forward to you, it's a change of 3.6 because of course we already had accounted for that loss in terms of the recommended budget that we presented to you. So Miranda and Aaron and I had all of about 30 seconds to huddle up before getting on the last finance committee meeting with our colleagues at the city. And so we kind of thought about two potential pathways and have a recommendation, and then, would be open for conversation. But one version is that that you all sort of have your conversations about the things that are your priorities that you're thinking about and do try to vote the budget out of committee this evening. And then what we would do is at our next board meeting next Tuesday in workshop, we'd come forward with our recommendation for how we'd adjust the budget based on this new information. And then the whole school board would have that budget and would be making decisions about incorporating our recommendations that we share in workshop and or making other amendments to get to the final budget. So that would be kind of pathway one. Pathway two is that you would want that information in committee before you then do your work here and would vote it out to the full board. And that would require that we add a meeting. And we were thinking this week, probably Thursday, in order to keep the timeline on track with all the other variables that you all know are important to kind of stack in line. So I think we're open. I think our preferred approach is probably the first. I think Chair Bryden, if you want to speak to your perspective on that, but I think that's, kind of how we were thinking about this. And again, we've thinking about it as in for a matter of minutes.
Sure. No, Whew, what a roller coaster. So I agree. I think path one is probably the one that I would prefer to see us land on, specifically, especially if, you know, we have a little bit of an opportunity within this meeting here to talk about, you know, our priorities and the things that we as individual committee members would have been advocate. Well, I wish I could save X or Y or Z. And then the two of you can use that information as you do your next iteration of the budget. That's my preference. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would prefer fewer meetings. I think that I think it would be hard for me to vote on the budget, not understanding what the full picture is now. I think the context changes a lot. We just got $3.6 million. So I would actually propose even adjourning this meeting and rescheduling it at a time when the staff have enough time to update the budget and provide us an updated proposal. I just think it really changes the context, and it's I think any conversations about amendments or it's hard to evaluate changes it's hard to evaluate amendments, and certainly I prefer not to vote on a budget before I see kind of where it's actually landing.
Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
I agree. I had 4 amendments, all based on the fact that there was such a tight budget, and, you know, shifting things here and there. Some of those things go away right away, but not knowing where things are going to shift with the new money or is a concern. I would agree to a meeting. If we did it Thursday, I'd ask it was after 7, just because I'm on base negotiations until 7 on Thursday. So that piece.
Lily, go ahead.
Did you say me? Did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A couple quick thoughts. Appreciate that kind of perspective and understand that. So I guess 2 things I'd say is I threw out Thursday and then I wanted to throw it back in because that gives us tomorrow to figure this out. So I think just realistically, if you all want to adjourn now and push it off, Miranda and Aaron and I were just quickly texting. I think Monday would get us before workshop. Miranda, chime in here if I'm not as fast on my text, and gives us a couple days to sort out what we're thinking. So I'd say I just add that to the conversation. And then I think I would agree, let's not belabor a meeting tonight if we don't have the information we need. The only thing I think that it would be helpful for us to know is any guidance from you all around where you'd want us to come in on the tax rate increase, because we could redo our budget with the same overall impact or adjust it, but it would be helpful to know before we do that work if you are going to want to signal anything to us. And Aaron, chime in here if you have a different take or clarification of what I'm saying, but it would be great if we understand kind of your bottom line, and then we can, work on adjustments with that in mind.
Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Given all of the pressures on our budget, and the pressures are intense, I am comfortable where the tax rate is, but I would like to move less of our local budget over to ESSER funding. So we're setting up. We're going to have a cliff next year. We're setting up less of a cliff next year. That's my, at first blush, my reaction.
Board Member Opperman.
Yes, I would say if we could possibly look at a 6.5%. So not a big change in some aspects, but if that's possible, and we keep with a strong movement of things onto a regular budget that we would, so we aren't dependent upon SURF next year. I would move to that direction.
Vice Chair Bondo, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize what Member Victor just mentioned about minimizing the especially the core programming. Then we move to the SURF 3 and try to see which the money then we just receive, how we can bring it back to the local funding, so we can make sure then we can have a long planning. When I say that is because I look at the redesign of the secondary, everything we had as a resolution. And then when I see then we have those core programming in the SURF 3, so we're playing safe, but it's not something that we see in the long-term process. So I just want to have that one into consideration, reducing what we can the best to the core programming, going back to the local funding. Thank you.
I will say that from my perspective, I agree with both board members Bondo and Figdor about the approach to SURF and trying to mitigate that cliff issue in FY25. In terms of the bottom line property tax increase, I do think that 7 or near 7 is, I mean. The state adjustment in subsidy is not enough to fill the gap in terms of what we need to deliver services for students to be really successful. I wouldn't go any lower than 6.5. Certainly, I think if it's possible to come in a little bit under 7, that might be successful, but that's still sort of where I am in terms of a comfort level. Are there other board members who'd like to share their opinions as well?
Thank you, Chair. I would just agree with what you have mentioned. 6.5 sounds reasonable to me. And we're expecting some cuts next year and some other, change. So that sounds correct with me.
Thank you.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
That's very helpful. So thank you all for that. So we're hearing some members at 6.5, some at 7, or slightly below 7. And then this feedback around the SURF and core services. So we can use that feedback as we take next steps. And then the only other thing is I think we've seen some activity from board members as far as some of their interests. So if there's other feedback like that would be helpful for us to know, I guess either sharing now, or I think we have things that folks were thinking about and prioritizing, but just having that up front now for our contemplation might be useful in sort of trying to have us have a successful process that's not overly complex. So just wanted to invite, if not now, just that sort of ask to have that feedback, which I think we have most of before we do this work over the next few days.
That makes sense. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So with that in mind, I let the Finance Committee know, as well as the co-superintendents, but Board Member Bondo and I talked about adding back the pre-K DLL teacher position that was cut from the budget. I have looked at the ratios, and our allow plan requires 1:18 ratio, and just at the numbers we have now, we need those 5 teachers in order to meet our ratio, and we're adding 2 classrooms, and we'll be in additional locations next year, and those teachers go between what I believe will be 12 locations. So I feel strongly that we should not cut that position. And I can go into more of that if, on Monday or or thereafter. So that was, I was going to propose to add it to the local budget without an offset.
Thank you. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
Thank you. I was at looking at what was cut. I agree with Board Member Bondo about the suggestion on putting back a position, particularly related to ELL or DLL. I would look again at the possibility of, instead of adding back some positions like garden teachers and all, which are that there we would look at putting more individuals in classrooms or smaller classrooms. I did some different number looking at the number of elementary school students, teachers, and I don't know all the breakdown of all those teachers. So with that in mind, I still think that the size of elementary classrooms, particularly K-3, could be smaller, or that we consider increasing the number of ed techs that are not attached to a special ed student, that teachers at any level, but particularly at the elementary level, have available an ed tech to help work with students during a regular class time. That to me, I looked at more research even more, and when it comes to students who have disadvantages or marginalized, smaller classrooms are always better. And we're looking at the 17 to 18 numbers of what I was seeing in literature this weekend. So that's my piece.
Thank you. Board Member Youssef, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a new thing, but I just want to recognize my support of what Board Member Emily Victor and Mickey mentioned, to have the FTA back to the pre-K. As a district, we really did great job. Our Portland promise to be consistent with the pre-K. So, and the need is increasing as we have a lot of community coming, and so it's a need that always there. So thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Russell Better, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Is it all right to just share a couple priorities as not a member?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to +1 to Member Figdor's prioritization of the pre-K DLL position. I feel like that's absolutely critical. And then I just wanted to throw out there that I feel pretty strongly that at least one FTE of the family community specialist position we should be funding. Just knowing how our multilingual staff is and I'm so pleased that we have the intake positions, but I just feel like that is a really critical role that we need more support there. And then lastly, the BCBA, I know there were 2 unfunded, but I would like to advocate for at least one of the behavioral analysis analyst positions, as I feel like that's really a need that we don't have in our general education population at all right now. So that's just another one I wanted to flag. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Youssef, is your hand up from before, or do you have another question? Okay. Vice Chair Bondo, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to emphasize what both Russell just mentioned, because that's why he was on my notes here for the specialist. So I think be more specific on the language than we're looking for. I think Portuguese will be the most appropriate in that area if we take that one into consideration. And I just want to also emphasize about my co-sponsor on the DLL pre-K. is because of what's happening in the community right now. And I think when we do the investment for the multilingual, that area for the early foundation, early childhood education is the baseline for what the new student really need for. And I think having the position back to the local budget, I think is going to balance what we need to create as a stability for those young kids to start earlier. So that's just what we can go on and on, but that's my support to bring that position back to the local budget.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bondo. Chair Lentz, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think that this is just a helpful conversation in general. So I'm glad that we're doing it. Just a couple of things to add. I would just second the DLL teacher. I know that we've had a hard time staffing it, but I would like to keep it along with the family community coordinator. That's not the right word, but I think you know what I'm talking about, what Aura brought up. I'd also just like us to look at the equity leader stipends. I don't have a sense of how much that is, but that also feels really important to compensate folks for. So I would just like more information around that. And if we haven't spent all the money already, and that's a possibility, that would be like a second tier priority for me. And then just revisiting, I know that this current budget as it stands really does make a great investment in HR, but I think that that's a place that we're still really far away from the suggested ratios. So just would like to put that in the mix again, please.
Thank you. I will say, in terms of my perspective and priorities, I think the pre-K DLL teacher, I agree with that. If it fits in this, bucket of money that we're talking about now, it would be great to be able to retain the living schoolyard teachers and the community coordinators in terms of being able to avoid having to ask our school staff to absorb additional tasks. I did see in one of the presentations, there was a request for 5 language acquisition ed techs that was not able to be funded. So that, language acquisition, multilingual, that category of need, I would love to see us be able to support that more. Go ahead, Malia.
This is super helpful. And I think what's exciting is to hear such alignment to the priorities. So I think different people have takes on the family community specialists, the pre-K DLL, the ed techs. And so what that helps us do now is we have that feedback is we can kind of go back to the team that has the deep expertise in terms of, we don't have endless resources, but like of these things that we didn't get to move forward, what we would do is kind of bring that forward and then give you our logic, right? So if we're like, well, instead of the community specialist or the pre-K, we go here, but like understanding where you're coming from, it helps us kind of frame that up for you. And at least so you can understand our logic in terms of what we'll recommend. So appreciate this little bit of time to get a quick sense and pulse check from you all.
Absolutely. Erin and Malia, were you hoping to finalize a rescheduled meeting time before we wrap up today?
If we can, I don't know how hard that will be. So if we're looking at Monday.
Yeah, I think, the thought was proposing and, the usual, what had, I don't know how much usual there had been, but, the Monday afternoon time slot, I think had worked in that. Yeah, Monday, 4:30. So that feels like that potentially is a good, kind of moment to keep us on track with the overall budget, give us some time to kind of do the engagement, develop things. Obviously that'll make for a quick turnaround from Monday to Tuesday, but I think this input today could put us on track for, hopefully a pretty smooth transition from one to the other.
But yep. All right. Monday at 4:30. Sounds good. Are there other thoughts that folks did not get a chance to voice that they would like to voice? issue a last call. Anything that may have occurred to you in the last couple of moments? Okay. So I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Super. Thank you. Motion from Board Member Opperman and second from Board Member Youssef. Show of hands. Vote to adjourn. Thank you so much. It's unanimous. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.